February the 21st, 1944. 800 American bombers are returning from a raid on targets in Germany. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They've been in the air for 5 hours, and finally, they've left the last of the enemy fighters and flak batteries behind. Everyone relaxes as they pass over the Norfolk coast. Then, tragedy. They were just minutes away from the safety of their base when suddenly one of the bombers collided with another and the two planes came plummeting down to earth somewhere around here in the Reedham Marshes. All 21 crew members were killed. So what exactly happened? We've got just 3 days to try and shed some light on the mystery. We're going to be excavating one of the planes in the hope that its carcass may yield some clues, if there's any of it left. And we're going to try and find out as much as we can about the two crews and the events that led up to the crash. The bodies of the two crews, one piloted by Captain John Hutchison, the other by Lieutenant Warren Pease, were recovered by the US Air Force shortly after the crash. All that's left today, somewhere under these Norfolk marshes, is the mangled wreckage of their planes. What do we know about our plane's last moments?
We know the two aircraft had just broken out of cloud and that Hutchison's aircraft, leading the formation, was descending straight and level, and Pease's aircraft then emerged from cloud seemingly out of control and pulled up in front of Hutch's aircraft. The two aircraft impacted, and we know that Hutch's ship spun into the marshes instantly and exploded. Pease's aircraft then had part of its tail taken off, but was under some form of control, according to local eyewitnesses, and descended towards the marsh, apparently tried to crash land, but then impacted over there and exploded.
It's taken Ian 30 years of research to piece together that much of the story. He first identified the aircraft involved by excavating Captain Hutchison's plane from the marshes, and he established the sequence of events by talking to eyewitnesses and scouring official accident reports. But the story's not complete. Ian wants us to help him dig up the second plane, for in among its remains, he hopes to find a clue to the actual cause of Lieutenant Pease's final fatal dive. So this is what we're looking for?
Yeah, this is a B-17G Flying Fortress, so cool because of all the guns sticking out of it all over the place.
Giant aircraft for its day. Some missions they would have 800 or 1,000 of these in the skies.
The sky must have been black when that
and the
many
noise
was over.
for these
It would
big
have
engines.
trembled, yes.
Yeah.
Ian thinks we'll find Pease's plane somewhere in this field. And geophysics are already going over the area with a state-of-the-art metal detector. It may look like something from the local skip, but sensors in the frame can register metal to a depth of 5 metres.
Gosh, truth, John, what's that lot?
Well, this is the results from the metal detector on wheels. And here we're looking at the surface. So there's lots of surface metal, that's the yellow splodges. But what's of interest is a concentration there. And if we go to a greater depth, then we've lost the surface debris.
Yeah.
But we're still getting this strong signal here.
Oh,
and also that point there.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's also showing at depth. Seems
Where
a good
exactly are
idea.
we talking about?
Well,
Just over here, Tony. There's a lot of material that's been dug out of the dike, and that's been scattered on the surface. But our anomalies, the strong area is broadly here.
right.
You know, it gives us confidence that there could be a large body of metal.
And how much further away is this second place?
You're going the wrong way.
Oh, right. Where is it?
This way.
I must have had the map upside down.
Well, round about here, Tony.
What the results can't tell us is how the wreckage is lying, how deep it is, or how much of it the US Air Force left behind. So Mick decides to open a trench on each of the two blobs, just to see what's there. To solve the mystery of the collision, we're going to have to treat this like an air crash investigation. That means digging pretty much all the wreckage out of the marsh, and this is going to present us with some unusual problems. We'll probably have to dig several metres deep over a very large area, hence the giant mechanical diggers with the very long reach and the very big buckets. And it's also very likely, this being marshland, the trenches will fill with water. So we've brought along some huge pumps.
Good morning to you. I'm Flight Sergeant Don Borrett. I'm from 5131 Bomb Disposal Squadron. And
But what's worrying Phil and Carenza more than anything is what was on board the plane when it crashed.
As far as we can tell, there's no large bombs on the aircraft.
So you say as far as you can tell. How confident are you about that?
Well, we can never be 100% confident that the aircraft came back empty, but as far as we can tell from records, that came back carrying no large bombs. But what you are going to find, or is a possibility you can find, are these .5 calibre shells.
That looks a pretty dangerous piece of kit.
It's not dangerous as such, so if you hit it with the base of a spade, it shouldn't go off, okay? But if you hit it with something small in the centre of that percussion cap,
like a trowel?
Like a trowel or something, if you hit it with some force, then there is a chance of that going off.
I mean, how big an explosion? Is it something that will kill you or just hurt you?
No, it'll just hurt. It's not going to kill you, but it will hurt, it will cause lacerations, that sort of thing.
Don thinks there could be several thousand rounds on the site, and almost at once, the first ones surface in Trench 2.
So you can see that one hasn't
gone off, has it?
It also bears out what you were saying about how hard you could hit them, because you actually see you hit them with a digger bucket.
But you can see it came out literally
gone right through to the metal.
Right, yeah.
Bravely, they dig on in both trenches. And as they do, an army of Ian's fellow aircraft enthusiasts, armed with a dazzling array of metal detectors, descend on the spoil in search of finds. But there's nothing except ammunition. And it's soon clear that if there is an aircraft here, it's quite deep. Do we know very much about our particular crew?
No, my research concentrated on the other plane, which crashed about 800 yards away. That was the Hutchison crew, and even have a photograph of the crew. That's Hutch, Johnny.
How old were those guys?
He was slightly older than the rest of the crew, late 20s, but most of them 19, 20, 21. He was well respected by the rest of the men on the base, and they were quite heartbroken all across the base when his crew went down. And they were on their 25th and last mission. Coming home, that would have been the end of the war for them. And a few minutes from base, tragedy, a collision, and they were wiped out in seconds. And we've got here,
Tragic.
a telegram. This is from Hutch, which was sent home a day or two before this fatal mission.
I'm okay, one to go, love to all, Johnny.
That says it all, that's the tragedy.
Finding some explanation for the deaths of Hutch and the two crews in the wreckage of Pease's plane is clearly a long shot. There's no black box. Our only hope is if there's a clue in the fabric of the airframe, or in one of the engines, or on a propeller, or in the setting of the dials and levers in the cockpit. If they survive the crash, if we can find them. And in Trench 2, there's already an indication of the difficulties we face.
Oh, we found a bullet! Look! Actually got the bullet out of the end here.
It's produced only more ammunition, and already it's become a pond.
Can you switch it on now then, please? Over.
Yep.
This pump can shift 60 litres of water a second, but it alone can't solve our drainage problem. We also need this. The marshes round here are protected by strict environmental legislation. And because water from the trenches is likely to be contaminated by fuel and chemicals from the aircraft, we've had to build this 90-metre-long purification tank to hold it in.
Can you go over the bottom with your metal detector thing so that we can see if there's anything else left in there?
Okay.
Oh! All right. Yeah, okay then.
Yeah.
This isn't just any detector. The RAF usually use it for finding bombs, though in this case, we'd rather they found us the plane instead.
No, there's nothing underneath here. There's nothing in here of a decent size.
Right, I think we might think about closing that one then. Do you want a hand coming out?
That's a blow. And if only a few rounds of ammunition gave geophysics a large reading here, what are we going to find in Trench 1? Phil soon puts our minds at rest as he pulls the first bits of aeroplane from the ground.
Bit of a gasoline smell?
Yeah.
Bit of a fuel pipe then.
Yeah, look at that. Parachute, isn't it? Look, here's one of the shrouds, isn't it? One of the, yeah.
Cords. Yep.
Yeah. What you got?
We've got a glass wingtip light.
Lord alive. Oh, wow. So, what's that? That's the, they're going to actually, a light
like
that's
the
actually
glass
going to
wing.
sit on the front of the wing? And,
Maybe on the edge of the very, very edge of the wing.
and you'd have green on one side and red on the
That's
other,
right,
would
for
you?
port and starboard, that's correct, yeah.
Good Lord alive.
And it's complete, which is very rare.
These finds have all been exposed by the mechanical digger, but there's some disagreement about how to continue from here. Time Team favour a traditional approach. They want to scrape away the next layers by hand, recording as they go, so they don't miss anything. The aircraft enthusiasts, on the other hand, want to carry on with the machine, so they can get to the bulk of the wreckage as quickly as possible. In the end, they compromise. The machine scrapes off a few inches at a time, then Phil gets going with his trowel. And the strategy seems to work, because within an hour, they hit metal.
We've obviously come down onto our first real archaeological layer. You see, we've got all this plate here, and here we've got cable, and there's pipe work, and then over here, look, there's some fabric. You can see that. Might turn out to be part of a parachute or something like this. And then most exciting of all, we've got this big rod here with this big screw thread coming up through it.
Hang on. Bob?
Oh, Bob's.
You used to be a line chief around here, didn't you?
Yeah.
So you were responsible for patching these things up when they came back. Have you any idea what it is that we can actually see?
I think that might be the tail wheel retracting screw.
And what's that?
Well, it would bring the tail wheel up and the tail wheel down.
This
when
bit here then, Bob?
Yes.
So with our first identifiable bit of the plane, we can start to explore the remains of Pease's B17. Back in February 1944, the plane and its crew were running regular bombing raids over occupied Europe as part of the 385th Bomb Group based at Great Ashfield in Suffolk. Mick's gone to find out from Ian and our historian Guy what the group had been doing the day the two planes crashed.
Well, we know that 34 aircraft had taken off from their base at Great Ashfield in Suffolk and flown across the North Sea to attack the Diepholz aircraft depot that you can see there. There.
Oh, right.
And we know that they severely damaged it. And then they turned and were heading for home back across the North Sea towards Great Yarmouth.
They'd taken part in a raid involving more than 900 bombers in something we call Big Week.
Big Week?
Big Week in late February 1944, which was part of a huge, long campaign to destroy the German aviation industry.
Right.
Well, the Big Week was also a concerted effort. When the RAF and the Americans combined, they were going to hit the Germans with the force of both air forces and then knock the Luftwaffe out. That way, when the troops went ashore a few weeks later, or in February, we're talking about an invasion in June, then you would not have the Luftwaffe opposition. And it worked, because they didn't.
What's not working, though, is the archaeological compromise in Trench 1. Since hitting the screw, which Bob now thinks is actually part of the main undercarriage, Phil's banned any more digging by machine. So when Ian returns, he finds Phil picking at the same layer of wreckage with a trowel, while the frustrated diggers gaze longingly at chunks of metal they'd just love to yank out with a machine.
Nick, I'm getting a bit concerned about the speed of the dig. We're now well into day one, and we, to me, need to make some form of trade-off between traditional archaeology and perhaps recovering something a little faster. Otherwise, we're going to spend 3 days on this.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Phil?
Well, I mean, if we're going to do this in an archaeological fashion, then, I mean, we've got to do it properly.
It's just that the time element now that's pressing against.
But you know, with the way I mean, it's interesting that you think that it's going slow, because we're often accused of being the opposite, going too fast. So that's novel. We like.
Oh yeah.
That's
a bit of a
good.
trade-off, I suppose. One of the things we're accused of is being too fast.
Yeah.
So it's trying to trade off between the speed at which we would like to go and recognising the archaeological side of it.
There are two.
In the end, Mick agrees to let the machine have another go, but only to widen the trench so he can see how far the wreckage extends. And he's insisting none of it's removed until it's been recorded. But all day while we've been beavering away on this side of the big dike, John and his geophysics team have been working over here in this field, and hopefully by now he'll have got some results for us.
What do you mean, hopefully by now?
How have you done?
It's actually quite exciting, Tony. This is the dike coming through the middle of the two survey areas, and this is the wheeled magnetometer again. We're getting really strong signals on this side, and what appears to be a whole scatter of anomalies.
And this is where we've dug already?
That's where you've dug already.
Now, to my untutored eye, that would say that the middle of the plain's in the dike.
Well, that's what it seems to imply.
Well, at least debris across the whole area is what it looks like, doesn't it?
I mean, it's almost, to me, Tony, is this depression here. Could that be the original depression from where the planes crashed? We're getting strong signals right on the edge here and coming back this way. Is that
straight out
a
through
possibility?
Here. Yeah.
So, is the plane in the field or in the dike? Join us after the break. I knew it would be big, Mick, but I don't think I ever realised it would be this big. It's about as wide as 2 cricket pitches, isn't it?
Yeah, and very high, look, right up to the turret.
It's only when you see one of these bombers in the flesh, like this one at Duxford Air Museum, that you realise how little we've found so far and how much we've still got to do.
We ought to have a look on the undercarriage, because that's where Bob thought those bits were from.
That we found in the trench?
Yeah. Yes, there we are. Look, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we've got the sleeve round it as well.
Yeah. But as yet, that screw is the most substantial bit of this huge monster we've managed to recover. So back at the site, everyone's digging like crazy. And we've opened a new trench, Trench 3, on the other side of the dike, where John got his strong response yesterday evening. However, an hour's archaeology has revealed only a cluster of ammunition and this steel hawser, which Ian thinks is left over from the US Air Force recovery operation in 1944. And the soil in the trench looks totally undisturbed.
Certainly the hawser could have caused the ferrous responses. It's worth scanning just to see if there's anything else, though.
No, that looks clean.
With no sign of wreckage here, we've no reason to believe there's anything in the dike either. So our eyes focus once more on Trench 1.
Just plane it back, keep planing it back. That means that we should be able to see stuff coming up in the trench.
Phil's finally agreed to let the machines do more of the work, and at last we're pulling large chunks of metal out of the ground. By mid-morning, there's plenty for Bob, the old crew chief, to identify.
That is part of the magneto harness that went around the outside of the engine, and you can see the spark plug high tension lead.
Oh, that's where the plug went?
This went up to the spark plug, yeah.
What's that, for example?
This is a piece of the spar area that looks to me like it was in the Bombay, because it's beefed up real good.
So we're sort of looking
between the fuselage. This thing is inside the fuselage.
Thanks. Why did they have to wear all this stuff?
They would be flying at 20,000 feet, and the outside temperature would be minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So unless you were covered up, you'd just freeze to death.
Mick?
Yeah.
Where are you?
I'm right up the front end in the cockpit, look. Can you see me through the...
Oh, yeah, I can see you.
You're coming through
It's
where
pretty narrow, isn't it?
It's claustrophobic. You're coming through the mid-gunners there, look. That would have been knee-deep in shells. And then you're coming round the ball turret, look.
Yeah.
There in the radio operator's room there.
Yeah.
And then you've got to squeeze through the bomb bay.
Oh, this is the bomb bay up here?
Yeah.
I'm never going to get through there. Hang on.
Two big bomb racks. Just imagine squeezing through there, though, Tony, you know, with all the noise and the fighters and everything. I think you'll have to take your parachute off.
There it goes.
Yeah, when he comes over that sill there, you've got to squeeze under the ammunition boxes. Must have been very difficult. And then you've got to come through under the top turrets, which is where you are now, look. And then when you get to there, you could come up here to where the two pilot seats, which is where I am. This is the only bit of armour, look, these two plates behind the pilots.
Imagine if there was a crisis in the plane, if you were clutching for your parachute.
You're trying to get out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what it must have been like, you know, as our chaps were sort of coming in to crash, you know, the panic of, you know, wondering if they could get out. Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
This is the armour plating of the pilot, Warren J. Peace.
Right. To protect him from shells from the back.
Good Lord.
And I think that this is a pilot's seat because of the way it's cut to allow access to get up into the cockpit seat in that.
The pilot always sat on the left-hand side.
Right, right.
That is the armour plating at the back of the seat that he died in.
Right.
Slow, there's lovely lettering on that one. I like that one.
Annie Gordon had probably met the men in our two crews. She was a Red Cross worker at Great Ashfield Air Base during the war. She gave first aid to the injured and hot tea to everyone else. But she was far better known at the time as a painter of naked women, because as well as being a nurse, she was one of the most prolific painters of B17 nose art.
They usually wanted these lovely girls.
Not many clothes on.
No, not many clothes on, but some of them were quite nice. You know, they really weren't so bad as people thought.
Did you paint whatever they asked?
Yes, I did, more or less. I mean, the ones I did, I don't think they asked me anything really too awful at all.
Offspring, Mr. Lucky, Madame Shoo Shoo, and pregnant Portia were all hers. We're going to make a memorial to the two crews, and for it, she's agreed to paint a replica of the picture on the nose of Hutchison's first plane, Sleepy Time Gal.
I used to sit up on upturned cases of bombs. this. And then this is her arm.
Back on site, Ian's getting impatient again. Although Trench 1 is still producing lots of wreckage, it's all relatively small stuff. He thinks what we're finding could just be the debris trail from the crash, and the main body of the plane might be elsewhere.
If we weren't here, where the hell would you go down there? Because I'm getting a bit... I'm going to be perfectly honest.
Vic, one of the digger operators, has spent most of his adult life working on the marshes.
But where? Where do you go?
Along the dike and both sides. Take a little off the bank, then that's where the interesting bits are.
Okay, what do you mean by interesting bits?
I had some parachute handles out there, and we found a silver dollar. And last time I had a dig in there, there was a lot of oil and like paraffin stuff come up.
So perhaps some of the plane is in the dike after all. And when Mick gets back to the site shortly after lunch, he's under immediate pressure to find out.
I mean, what would we do, Ian? Would you say, come in across here? And whoop, blimey.
A bit foggy, but
very
my
soft,
hunch would be...
and take this lump out in the middle.
Well, if he's going down there, and part of what Vic has said to me is a little bit of this is him.
Oh, the scoop is?
A little bit of fishing around here, I think. So, but he can't get down to whatever's in there because he hasn't got the reach. We've got the reach. So now's the chance to get in there and see if we can get it out. And then come back, because we know we're getting some readings in here. Careful. We're getting some readings in here.
Start again, yeah.
Right. We know we're getting some readings in here.
Well, we are on these geophysics. We've got these two readings across the front here, so we should be looking at this area as well.
Yeah, but then these bits then begin to join, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just square it out.
Square it out and go down.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to get on and pump the dike out.
Yes. Yeah,
Let's get on with it then.
Okay, then straight on ahead.
Even at 60 litres a second, it's going to take several hours to drain this section of the dike. In the meantime, Stuart's teamed up with Bernie Forward, an air crash expert.
It can roll in that plane, but not pitch.
So if the witnesses are... He investigated the Lockerbie disaster, and he's come along to help us solve our mystery. The first task is to work out exactly how Pease's plane came down and what happened as it hit the ground.
And two witnesses mentioned the idea of a belly landing. And one is quite specific.
Yeah.
It slid along the marsh and appeared to be all right until it came to a dike. The nose dipped and the rear fuselage lifted and it struck the dike and blew up.
Yeah.
A statement was taken from a man he was working with at exactly the same place, which is nearly a mile away, so they're an awful long way from where the crash site is. Gives much the same story. But, and this is an important point here, as it was about to touch down, his view was obscured by trees. And he says, although not seeing the landing. So there's a contradiction straight away.
And they were both standing in the same position.
That's right.
So we clearly need some more reliable eyewitnesses, and the two of them get on the trail. After 2 hours of pumping, the dike's now as dry as it's ever going to be.
Good God.
And we've started having a rummage. Trench 1, meanwhile, has continued to produce fascinating stuff, including some striking reminders of the young men who died here.
I think it's amazing what we've got here is this throat mic, which even says made in Inglewood, California. It looks so new. It probably still works as well if we had a chance to plug it in. And this peak, which I assume is from the peak cap of an officer's hat, which is rather poignant. And over here we've got this inner glove to keep the hands warm from the perishing cold at 20,000 feet. If you touched anything metal inside the aeroplane with the gloves off, you'd burn your hands. The skin would just stick to the metal and you'd get frostbite. It's unusual to find perishables like that anyway, isn't it?
Well, but it's because it's so recent, isn't it? I mean, it's just not very long ago. These people should be still alive by rights.
Yes, yes they should.
Stuart and Bernie have made good progress in their hunt for new eyewitnesses. They've tracked down one of the crew of a third bomber that was in the formation with Hutchison and Pease. Bob Goldsmith was the ball gunner and did indeed see the crash, but hasn't until now had a chance to tell his story.
Well, what happened, I think 3 or 4 days after the incident, they were off on the raid and they got shot down. So they never got a chance to give their report to the accident investigations at the time.
Well, did they become prisoners of war or something?
Yeah, some were taken prisoners of war, and I think the pilot was actually killed. So until now, nobody's ever heard their side of the story. So this could be quite illuminating.
Yeah, far away.
Shall we go for it?
Mm. Bob was chatting with the 2 waist gunners in the fuselage when the crash occurred.
Our first indication back in the plane where the gunners were, we were thrown off our feet as the pilot, Gene St. John, was flying the machine, and he threw the right wing up to avoid debris, apparently. So we scrambled to the window, the right waist window, and looked, and here's the one plane over on its back, and the whole tail assembly, the dorsal fin and everything, was missing. It went a different direction, apparently.
Can you remember, Bob, once the tail separated, what the flight path or trajectory of the aircraft was?
It was nose down, but the belly was up. And it looked to me like it was trying to get upright. That's what it looked like. As we watched, 2 or 3 chutes streamed out, but never opened. They didn't have enough time. They were too close to the ground.
Right.
He just didn't have enough altitude, that's all.
Thanks ever so much for your help.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, bye, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
What did he mean when he said it would seem to be going nose down, belly up?
Well, what had happened, basically what he meant is that once you lose the tail section of the aircraft, it will pitch violently nose down. And what it's done is gone past the vertical.
Yes,
so
I see.
it's going in that way.
Right. This could change everything. We'd assumed the plane came in on its belly and the bulk of the wreckage would be only a metre or so beneath the surface. But if it came down vertically, nose first, the wreckage is likely to be much deeper. And after 2 hours of fruitless scooping, we're pretty sure it's not in the dike. Which means unless someone's beaten us to it, it must be under here in Trench 1. And that's a problem, because to get to it, we're going to have to penetrate through this stable layer of clay into waterlogged peat underneath. If we do go deeper, though, what are the problems?
Well, first of all, the peat will collapse, then the clay will collapse on top of that, and then you'll find the sides will be going back and back and back. You could go yards with all sides caving in.
That sounds as a very good argument for not going deeper in there immediately and for going wider.
But Mick, if we do just extend the trench out there, aren't we going to get more scatter like we got out of the top of that trench?
Yeah, but we've been getting good stuff out of there, haven't we?
Oh, we've
Phil?
been getting some really good stuff, yeah.
So, I mean, we would prejudice getting any more material like that if we dig a hole in there now, because, you know, what Vic's describing is a sort of engineering disaster, really. We won't be able to do anything else in there.
So extend this trench, get a lot more bits and pieces out, and then in the final analysis...
Then we go down.
Yeah.
So, without much conviction, Trench 1 is extended along the side of the dike. But after just a few scoops, it's clear the clay is clean, and we decide to call it a day for today. End of day 2, and all our equipment's been up and running today. The pumps, the mechanical diggers, the metal detectors, Phil, of course. And we've been spreading out and out and out and coming up with some fantastic finds. But tomorrow is the big day, because tomorrow we're going down. Join us after the break.
Coming in with his left inboard engine dead. 23, with a feathered prop on his left outboard engine. 24, with a chunk of tail gone. In the control tower, the Group CO is still watching and waiting.
Nine o'clock, day 3, and we've got just one day to figure out why our 2 planes didn't make it home. The answer probably lies deep under here in the wreckage of Pease's B17. But to get to it, we've got to dig down into unstable ground that could collapse our trench and end our search. Whether we get there or not depends on how wet the marsh is and how deep into it the plane penetrated.
A fairly clear picture is emerging already of a very high speed near vertical impact.
How can you tell that?
Well, this bit here, for example, this is stainless steel, fairly strong material. You can see the way it's been severely crumpled, which indicates a lot of energy going into that. Probably the most compelling evidence is this bit of kit here. As you can see, it's pretty heavy. This is part of the wing main spar, which is one of the strongest parts on the aircraft. It takes all the main loads, and you can see how it's been just smashed.
So what sort of speed do you think it might have been going at on impact?
Certainly in excess of 200 miles an hour.
So how deep do you think it would have gone into this earth?
Depends whether you're talking about the heavy bits or the lighter bits. Quite clearly, these pieces have been recovered from fairly near the surface, but things like the engine and the other heavy parts will penetrate quite deep down, and in this sort of terrain, I'd start at about 15 feet.
15 feet, so we've got to get that far down?
I think that's where you've got to start. I think that's where you've got to start, Tony.
Right.
Okay. Sorry about that.
So with our trench barely 4 feet deep, it looks like we've got a way to go. But at least the peat under the clay looks firmer and drier than we thought, so we can dig deep. And our luck's in. Only a few scoops into the peat is a rich seam of wreckage.
There's a big bit of metal in there, Joe. There it is. There it is.
Oh, God.
Glass.
Yes, it's all that laminated armoured glass that we...
So which bit would that come from?
That's from the right in front of the 2 pilots.
Is it?
Yeah.
Good Lord. What's
There's
this
the
plastic?
shape of it.
What's this plasticky stuff then?
That's in layers in between the glass. So you
Okay.
had sort of glass, plastic, and
Is that to stop it shattering?
that's to stop it
It's
shattering.
actually worked, hasn't it?
The trench is now 10 feet deep, and the next few bucket loads confirm we've reached what's left at the front end of the fuselage.
That is a 50 caliber machine gun.
God, you're joking.
Now that is beautiful. Look at that. Straight, superb condition.
Where would that have been in the plane?
Well, we've just been getting evidence from one of the gun sites, and we think it's either ball turret or top turret. Top turret just behind the 2 pilots.
So this is
ball
all the
turret
same area as the stuff we've just
This is coming out. We're in sort of cockpit area with that armoured glass we got, and then this. I mean, look at that. That condition is immaculate.
That's a fantastic find, but it's probably loaded, and the RAF team will have to make it safe before it takes pride of place in our memorial.
She's not very pretty, is she?
Well, not yet, but I mean, she hasn't got her makeup on, has she?
No, we've got to put the makeup on. Oh dear, her face is horrible.
Carenza and Annie are struggling to turn the centrepiece of the memorial, Sleepy Time Gal, from ugly duckling to dazzling swan.
We want to make her beautiful.
With Carenza as a model, they should have no trouble.
Turn your face a little towards me and a bit more towards. That's it. The hand goes like that. Then it goes like that. That's a bit better, isn't it? Ray?
Yes, yes.
Hello, is that Eugene St. John?
Stuart's been phoning America again. He's found another member of the crew that witnessed the collision. As co-pilot, Eugene St. John had the clearest view possible. He was actually flying the 3rd bomber on Hutch's left wing as the formation descended into the clouds.
I stayed close to Hutch and real close, and I could see his face. I could see him smoking about a foot-long cigar because it was his last mission. When we broke out the bottom, why, he and I were there, but Peace wasn't. I'm looking around to see where in the devil he is, and he come wheeling out of that, what was an overcast to us now and an undercast to him. He come out of there wide open. I think his engines were doing the maximum.
Right.
And he went under Hutchison's ship, and for whatever reason he pulled up and left his tail in between the number 3 engine and the fuselage of Hutchison's airplane. And then, of course, due to the high power, it pulled him right straight up in the air. Now I'm talking about Peace again.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it gets so high, why, it stalls out, and he flips over, and down he came, and he hit Hutchinson. Well, he cut his airplane in half. He went right through him.
Why do you think that Pease's plane behaved in the way it did?
That I don't know. I never understood that, and I've thought about that off and on for 50 years. I don't know what was the matter with him when he did that, because boy, he come out of those clouds. I saw him come out of there, and man, he was going as fast as possible to go.
Do you think it's possible that Pease's plane had been damaged by enemy fire?
No, sir, I do not. I was looking at him all the way back from France before we dropped down through there, and none of the 3 were damaged that I believe.
If Eugene's right, and all 3 planes were intact when they started the descent, then something must have happened to Pease or his plane when it was in the clouds. Our best chance of establishing exactly what, according to Bernie, is to find the propellers. And to do that, we need to establish where they hit the ground. And of course, it's Stuart who's got the most promising theory.
We've got one wing out here.
And one wing
out here.
Right.
We've marked that out. There's a red pole just across the
ditch.
ditch.
Yeah, on the other side of the dike.
So that's the wing.
Contours in the land around the fuselage in Trench 1 and evidence from this photo of the wreckage taken during the US Army recovery suggest to him that the plane hit the ground like this, which casts a new light on John's geophysics results.
So here's the dike.
Yeah.
There's the wingtip, the far wingtip that Stuart's talking about. The body of the plane in here, and along this axis will be the line of the wing.
Yeah.
Stuart's got another wingtip about here.
We're almost looking end on to it like this, aren't we?
Yeah.
So if you're looking end on, the line of the wings.
Yeah. These could be engines or stuff like that.
Could it be engine?
Or better still, a propeller? To find out, Mick opens our 4th trench here. And within minutes, it's terrifyingly deep. He also decides to have another poke in the dike, because if Stuart's right, there may be engines in there too. But in neither place is there any sign of a large metal object, and we're beginning to wonder if the site hasn't already been raided by enthusiasts. But at least Trench 1's still going strong, and has produced another star find, a 2nd machine gun, again with a round in the chamber.
There's a round in there, look. Still jammed in the breech there.
It looks like these 2 are a pair, from either the nose turret or the ball turret.
Perfect condition, look.
But Trench 1 is now 15 feet deep, and the wreckage seems to have run out.
When I threw it out to the far end, I had it on such a sensitive setting. If there's anything there in that area, it would have given me some sort of indication, and there was nothing at all.
Right.
So after 3 days of digging, we've opened 4 trenches and found lots of bits of metal. But we've not found anything to help us solve our mystery, and what we have found is hardly enough to make a plane. So where is it?
Well, I think the really logical answer has to be that when they were looking for the bodies, which is why the American Air Force came down here, they must have dug out most of what was left, most of what had plummeted into the ground, probably minus the wings and everything else, and they must have removed most of that to get the bodies out.
But it turns out the US Air Force weren't the only people to remove wreckage from the site, and we're still in with a chance of solving our mystery. People around here have been pretty cagey about what kind of exploration was done in our fields prior to our arrival. Well, it now appears that some years ago some people were poking around and they turned up 2 propellers off the plane. We've managed to locate them and I've now got them on the back of my lorry. So I'm driving them down to Bernie to see what he can make of them. We found the propellers in a local museum after one of the aircraft enthusiasts tells us he excavated them 20 years ago. He recovered them in the dike right where we've been digging. But at least we've got them now. And if they do hold the key to the mystery, Bernie's expertise should be able to unlock it. It's time for Don and his boys finally to dispose of all the bullets that we found, and as it's someone's birthday, we're going to let him press the button. Take it away, birthday boy.
Prime in. Ready?
Stubborn! Burn! No!
What a birthday! Back at the site, it seems we're in luck again. One of our 2 propellers apparently has an interesting story to tell.
It's basically in a condition which we call feathered, which means that these blades here, which normally are operating at an angle like this to the air, are now pointing straight fore and aft, so that they don't cause any air resistance.
So they're out of action, in fact?
Yep, they're out of action. The engine has stopped. The engine has stopped.
Right.
Now, what probably happened is that while they were in cloud, in this nice formation, the pilot got an engine problem. In the process of being distracted from his flying and his formation flying, in shutting this engine down and doing the feathering procedure, he became disorientated. Right? Let the nose of the aircraft drop, came out of the bottom of the cloud, as we know from witnesses, very, very fast, saw that he was approaching the ground very rapidly, so instinctively pulled very hard, pulled up like that, and as he'd obviously gone below the other aircraft, he probably didn't see it as he came out of the cloud, and he just pulled up straight in front of him. He basically just lost control of the aircraft due to distraction.
So it looks like the 2 crews were killed by a cruel combination of circumstances. If Pease's engine had failed at any other time, dealing with it would have been a routine matter. But it seems the engine stopped in cloud. The plane lost power, and Pease, terrifyingly, lost sight of his colleagues. Without visual reference points, he wouldn't have noticed his nose tip as he feathered his propeller. Then, eager no doubt to catch up with Hutch and St John, he probably opened the throttles on his 3 remaining engines, with disastrous consequences. After the first impact, Pease's plane hung on its propellers, stalled, then smashed a second time into Hutchison, and both aircraft plummeted to Earth. Well, it's the end of our final day. It's been a great dig, hasn't it? And we've had some fantastic finds. Most of these finds are going to go to the local museum, except for one spar and a machine gun and his painting, which are going to be made into a memorial for those men who died on that day in February 1944.